So I'm in a restaurant. It's a Thursday night. I'm by myself. I'm reading this book, this amazing book called High Risk. And all of a sudden, I realize that I'm going to have to rebrand my podcast. So if you know me and you know this podcast, then you know that I interview entrepreneurs and creative people about their business journey. And I think those are interesting stories. But I feel like what's really interesting is, can we talk with entrepreneurs and creative people about not only their business success, but their shame and how the shame relates to their business success or their lack of business success. So this is the thought that pops into my mind. And this is the first episode of the Great Shame Show. I am the guest, and this is Ben Timberlake. You're the writer of that book I'm talking about, the writer of High Risk. And I couldn't think of a better person to kick off this new series with than you.
It's an honor to be here. Thank you for choosing me.
Thank you for being here.
And so we're here to talk about shame.
Yay, such a fun topic.
Why, my first question is, why am I asking the questions here? Why did you pick me for this interview? To interview you?
Yeah. So it has to do with the way we met, but also has to do with your book.
Okay.
Because I'd read your book, High Risk. And sometimes when you read a book, like, even if you're like only at the half of it, you know you're going to read the entire thing immediately after you're done reading.
Right,
so at the half of the book, I'm like, I'm reading this thing again. And then your book is so very honest about so many things, but also about shame, that it just really, a lot of things clicked for me.
Okay.
And I realized that this podcast that is usually and normally about, usually I have to say, it's about business, and there are a lot of personal stories in there. But I think I also even sent you like a crazy voice note. I'm really like a tiny podcast, but then in the form of a voice note. I'm like, I don't know, I've seen the light. We need to talk about shame more. You're my inspiration. You're my shame inspirator.
Okay,
I don't know if that's
you.
nice, but it's true. And then the first thing I thought is, okay, I'm going to transform my entire podcast. I called my team. I'm like, we're doing a completely new podcast. And I thought the person that inspired me, but also I feel like in some of the conversations we've had, they're in a way shameless. And I felt like the perfect person to talk about shame with is this guy I feel very shameless with.
All right. So who has no sense of shame himself, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
I guess so.
But we've both been through quite shameful episodes of our lives, I guess. I mean, you've written a book in 2014, which was completely about
something that I was, up until I wrote the book, that was the thing I was just most ashamed about in my life.
Okay, can you, because it's only in Dutch, I haven't had a chance to read it.
Yeah.
Can you tell me what it's about?
So it's about sexual violence. It's about my family, and it's about the conversations, the sometimes very hard conversations I had with my father about what had happened to me. And the reason these conversations were difficult is because the perpetrator was one of his brothers.
Okay.
So I remember, when I started writing that book, I got a book deal, and it was for a completely different book. I can't even remember now. I was going to write a completely different book. And then I started writing. I think I was going to even maybe write some fiction. It's so long ago.
Okay.
And then I started writing my fiction book. But the book really that wanted to come true was the book about what had happened and how it had affected our family dynamics. And I remember speaking to my dad. I'm like, my dad was still alive back then. He died a couple of years back from cancer. And I remember sharing with my dad. I'm like, so I have this very cool book deal to write like a fiction. I don't know if I can even, but this other story really wants to be revealed. But it's about us. It's about our family. How do you feel about this?
How old were you at the time?
It's almost 10 years ago. So I think I was around 30.
And how old
49.
were you when the would you say abuse or sexual violence? What was
It was violence. It wasn't, because abuse gives you this sense of something that's an ongoing thing,
Mhm.
and it wasn't.
It was a single episode.
Yeah, but it completely broke down the entire family structure. So
And how old were you at the time?
20. I was 20.
So it was 10 years after the abuse that you decided to write about it. Why do you think, you as you said, the story was ready to reveal itself then? Why did you feel that you had to write this book at that point? I'm just interested in the not the delay, but sort of the timings between the incident and the book.
I think it has to do with a couple of things. First of all, my dad used to say, and now that he's gone, I feel like I understand it better every day. My dad used to have this theory. He was a teacher, and just also a very crazy, cool professor type dude. He had this theory that a story chooses you, that you don't pick a story chooses you, but it also has its own timing.
But did you mean that in a sort of in a fiction sense, in an academic sense, or an event that's going to happen in your life?
Yeah, he meant it. I think what he meant was a story can be something that happens to you, can be an event, can something you feel like you need to share with, can be all these things.
Right.
And he used to say that everything has its timing, and timing is a very, very big topic in my life. I'm not great at timing, I feel, but and that also that a story chooses you. So what was actually happening was I'm writing this fake fiction story. It's not going well at all. I'm just working hard at it. And then in the night, I would wake up at 3 and I haven't experienced this ever since, with just like almost intact, like fully formed, like, what's the English word? It's not, you have sentences and then a couple of sentences are a paragraph.
Yeah, okay.
I would just wake up in the night.
Them. Yeah.
And it was just, and then I would write it and read it the next morning and get really scared because of the truth of it.
Yeah, okay.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, no, I do, I guess.
But that's not an answer to your question, why the delay? I understand that that's not an
no,
answer.
I guess, no, I'm interested in seeing, I guess, people with post-traumatic stress disorder and things like that, and 10 years tends to be there tends to be a delay, and I can't work out whether that's because most of the people that we send to war tend to be sort of 17 or 18-year-olds, and by the time you kind of reach your late 20s or your early 30s, that time is the time of your life that you're ready to process these things. That's you've worked out who you are and the bits of you that you want to sort of take into the next stage of your life. Or it's just simply that 10 years, and I was speaking to a psychologist about this, and she was saying that actually the body tends to work in sort of 7-year cycles. That you're ready to reject this trauma by that point.
This is so interesting because I feel like at 27, so this happened when I was 20, then I was in denial for some time because I felt like I hadn't died, so it wasn't that bad. Some people just...
Okay.
And then I also felt like because my uncle tried to rape me, but it didn't succeed, I didn't feel like it was that bad. So I was a little, I'm in a story of it's not that bad. And I feel like with trauma, it changes your character, but very, very subtly. Not like something bad happens and you're completely different, but something bad happens and then parts of you start to die, but very slowly. So in the beginning, I was like, this was horrible. We had this after ripple of just like destruction because I was honest about it very early on.
From the...
Very early on.
Okay.
I told my parents. And then my father confronted his brother. And then that just created mayhem.
How soon afterwards?
Soon. Very soon. I don't know exactly. I know it took me 3 days to tell him.
Okay. So
but I was
really
very
soon.
close to my dad.
Yeah.
Um, and then and then he confronted him, and then just the entire dynamics of the family was just shaken to its core. Yes, and I don't know everything. So then I was in denial. I'm like, okay, so all of this happened. So this is bad. But I feel like, and that was always my way of dealing with things. If you didn't die, it maybe it's not that big of a deal. I used to be very insensitive, also to my own experiences.
Yeah.
And then, so I feel like what happens with trauma is it goes like below level, but then it just surfaces in your relationships. Yes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, definitely. It's like a sort of ink drop. It stains the stains the everything around you.
Yeah. So then I was very focused on career in my 20s. I worked at a television station. I had this very cool job, and I was traveling the world. And I didn't realize that I had become a little numb to life. Yes? And then at 27, I had this really awful, very bad, slightly abusive boyfriend. And the magic of him, he was terrible, but the magic of him was that he just, this trauma that was like in my veins, he just shook it out of me.
How?
That's a great question. He was just emotionally very volatile. I don't know if another way to put it. I would just.
Was he doing this consciously in a sort of in a helping way, or was just his terrible behavior just
his terrible behavior was just
woke you up to a pattern?
Yeah. And then some not so great stuff happened.
What?
Let me see what I can share about it.
Well, look,
he would just also be some parts of the. I don't think I've ever told this before. Some parts of that relationship were like anything that had to do with boundaries was just very hard for him to respect boundaries, and that's what. And I noticed that in all different aspects of our life. So, if we have to decide for something together, or but also sexually, right? And it just stirred up this old trauma.
Okay.
And then I got so angry, and I don't think I've ever, from 20 until 27, I didn't know how to access the anger. And then this dude came along, and I just woke up one morning, and I thought, I am going to kill this guy. And then I was a little afraid for myself. So I called a friend. I'm like, I think I know what it's like. I think I know what it feels like in your body when you want to murder someone. I was like, interesting, and also a little scary. And then the next morning I woke up again. I'm like, I still feel like I want to kill this guy.
Was this like the first signs of love then?
I don't think so.
Had you been in a complicated grown-up relationship before then?
With whom?
With anyone. I mean, I met you when you were. What? I mean, this was ages ago. When
I was 24.
You were 24, exactly. Yeah. So right in the middle of your kind of locked in phase.
I was very closed down.
Right.
As a person.
So it was this guy, the guy when you were 27. Was he kind of your first big relationship that you had?
No.
Okay.
Not even. Also because we weren't in a relationship for that long. But he is the first guy that I honestly wanted to kill.
Okay.
And then in the third morning I'm waking up, I still feel, now I'm getting a little scared. Like I'm from not a great neighborhood.
Mm-hmm.
I know like a friend of mine I grew up with that that I saw in church murdered someone when he was 18 and was put away in jail for like 12 or 13 years. So I know these things happen. I know great people murder people. This sounds bad.
No.
I hope nobody's going to take this as like a soundbite. So I was just a little afraid for myself, and because I was so angry. It was in my body. I was so angry. I can't even remember what the reason, but I was just so angry. But now I know this guy is just shaking up all this old trauma in me.
I guess
And then
that's
I
what I
started-
was asking
Yeah.
was whether you just had this anger erupting in you. I
Yeah.
mean, he wasn't the
No.
cause. He was just there at the time.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I knew I did know that because it was so much of it that I could like reasonably understand that it couldn't have been all him. It just because it was so out of proportion. Yes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that takes a hell of a lot of self-awareness in a moment of rage to be able to realize that it's not the target's fault. I know, that's impressive. I mean, that's cool. It's cool to
Yeah.
have that, you know.
Yeah, I
as you
feel
reach
like
for the kitchen knife.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah,
That's good.
That's maybe that's grace. Yes,
Yeah.
that's one of the like. But I called my friend and I'm like, I'm just taken over by this sentiment. And then a good friend of mine had a very woo-woo girlfriend, very like spiritual, like. And she said, well, there's this thing I think you should go to. It's a 5-day thing. The costs are €800 and they're going to help you. And I just signed up. I didn't see a website. I don't know what we're going to do there. But I felt like I had to check myself in somewhere.
Okay. What was it?
That's a great question. It was, I don't know. It's very hard to describe. It saved my life. Let me just. It's this. It was a sort of a retreat.
Mm-hmm.
Do you also say in English?
Retreat is a good word. Yeah.
It was a sort of a retreat, and I didn't know anything about it. That girl said this is going to help. I felt at that point very desperate.
Mm-hmm.
And also my character is that I usually sign up for things that I don't think about it too much. So I went there. And then I thought, I've entered a sect. That's what I thought for a second.
What was the sect?
Or is it called a sect? A cult? Oh, I'm trying to...
No, they're similar words.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because the first day, it was a 5-day thing. You had to wake up. At that time, I thought it was very early. Now, if a child, and I'm like 7 o'clock, it's not that early. But you had to wake up at 7. And you would do all these dynamic meditations. And all of it was very weird to me.
Mm-hmm. Had you been into sort of woo-woo stuff before?
One thing. I went to one thing, but that was all just very glitzy spiritual and very effective, but very glitzy spiritual stuff. It's like we're meditating on this mountain.
Okay.
It's just love and light.
Mm-hmm.
The world is really a beautiful place. And that's also true. But this was like an entirely different thing. So what they challenged you on is to really start feeling again. But that's not what they said on the website. And also I didn't read the website, so it's fine. So you would do all these very physical meditations that looked crazy to allow yourself to process emotion that it's in your body. So one of these meditations was very early in the morning. You have to wake up, and then for 15 minutes, and I was so afraid to do this. For 15 minutes, you have to breathe in and out of your nose. Erratically, is that a word? Is in a strange pattern.
Yeah.
Bring a lot of oxygen into your system.
Okay.
First of all, it looks hideous. You look like a beast doing it. And back then I really cared about. I'm like, these are all these strange people. I don't want to look crazy. But everyone was doing it. And then for 15 minutes, after that, for 15 minutes, they ask you to, they sounds very strange, but then you're asked to just voice your inner whatever. Could be frustration, could be pain, could be hurt, could also be joy. And then basically you just have to scream for 15 minutes.
That sounds great.
It's awesome, but I was so afraid. I I was so afraid. I'm like, this is a cult. Look at all these crazy people. I'm in the corner. Like, I'm rocking in the corner. Like, I hate this shit. But of course, I never leave. When it's very scary, I never leave. So I hate this shit. I hate this shit. But actually, I was very afraid because I felt like there's so much anger in me that maybe once I start screaming, I will maybe never stop and go mad. I feel like for a lot of people that suppress a lot of their emotions, this is the fear. That once the lid comes off, it's just endless. And that's not true. So the first day, I was just afraid and also judging everyone. I hate this place. All these people are ugly. I don't know what I'm doing here. But because I was just very afraid, yes? This is a mechanism, right?
It's a defensive mechanism.
Yeah, for sure. But then the second day, I tried a little and failed a little at it. But then the third day, I was like, fuck it, I'm here. I've also paid 800 euros. I see some of the people that are crazy in the morning are smiling in the afternoon. I'm like,
I want some of that.
Yeah, let me just see what happens. So the third day, I'm doing this thing. I'm doing this erratical breathing. And already I'm feeling like all this emotion. And I'm just afraid for myself, yes? And then this part comes and then you have to just let out your whatever. And when I still think about it, I'm probably going to cry somewhere during this conversation. It's fine. I just felt like from like the tip of my toes, I just felt like it's like a train, you know? It's like I'm like, oh my God. And then all this emotion comes out, like, and it's everything. It's just everything. It's just, first, of course, it's a little bit this boyfriend that I had, but then it's just rage against my uncle, and then it's also anger. It's also a lot of irrational stuff. Anger that I feel like my dad should have protected me. Just all this rage, and then all the stories with it.
Okay. Yeah.
And it's just endless stories. And then there's a lot of mourning. I'm mourning for my family. It's all of this. And I don't know, you know how children cry, yes? They just throw themselves on the floor and they cry, yes? In the supermarket when they can't get a... I was like this, on the floor. Foam is coming from my mouth.
For how long?
And I don't know. It felt like for hours and it wasn't. But the most wonderful thing, and this really changed my life, this really changed my perspective. What was great about it is that no one, and this is going to sound weird, no one intervened. The only thing that happened is that one of the women, and she's still my trauma therapist, and now trauma therapy is my hobby. I just do it for fun. Just to see what comes up.
For fun.
I really do.
Yeah, good.
Her name is Helene, and she just sat with me, and I was on the floor, and foam is coming from my mouth, and I'm crying hysterically. I think maybe for like
10 years after it.
Yeah. Crying, all these emotions, all these stories that I'm not even aware. And the only thing she did, I feel like, I don't know, and snot is coming from it. I was like, and the only thing she did is she sat next to me and she put her hand on my back. This is the only thing she did. And what I got from that was that I'm not alone, you know? So but this is my thing. And also what I loved about it is that nobody panicked, because apparently this is what we do at this weird thing.
Yeah.
And strangely enough, that helped me not to panic about what's happening. I wasn't panicked. I was just in it. But I'm not thinking something is going wrong. Yes, very important. And also nobody hurried me. Sometimes when things are very uncomfortable, we hurry each other. It's like, are you okay? Are you okay?
Yeah.
Are you okay? Because the other person is actually uncomfortable.
Is panicked. Yeah.
Are you okay? Everything is going to be fine. And no one did that to me. And it was wonderful because it just allowed me to release.
What was the closest thing in your life that was like? I mean, what would you compare it to?
Up until then, that was a really That was a first time experience. And now I have that all the time because I give it to myself all the time for everything. You know what I mean?
Like, yeah, I guess the sort of the picture in my head was definitely sort of it's panic, but it sounds like, it sounds like, psychologically vomiting up this
it really
thing
was.
you carried with you.
And you know what happens? Like if all that rage, because it's just rage, if all that rage is just has a safe space to be expressed.
Mm-hmm.
Like underneath it, like in the end, I just cried. I was on the floor. I just cried. I just cried for my father and I. Do you know what I mean?
But can we break this down? We don't have to go back to the incident itself, but talking about that sort of that explosion that you had in this trauma center of all of this, all of these things coming out of you. Can we kind of break down what they were? I mean,
Sure.
the first thing you said was rage against your uncle, who was the perpetrator. What did that look? What did that feel like?
Well, it had to do with this. Like, I'm just going to be very honest. That's also why, like, I asked you to do this conversation.
Yeah.
Because I've never, we don't know each other that well, but everything I've ever said to you was like 100% the truth. So I'm trying to keep this tradition.
Well, we've only met 3 times, so I think we're doing well.
Yeah, it's going well. It's going well. Like, the thing was this, and I was thinking about this yesterday because I knew that we were going to have this conversation. The thing that I was most angry about, I don't think I've ever told, but I am sure that all victims, I don't like that word, of sexual violence.
Let's use it here, just because it's a good word.
All victims, I'm sure, can relate. So there's the physical part of the violence, yes? That's physical. But there's also an emotional part of the violence. And usually, because it's very important for a perpetrator not to be found out. And the emotional violence, which is manipulation, can be very fierce. My uncle had told me, he said to me, he said, and it's blurry, but this is very sharp in my brain. He said to me like, oh, and now I am gonna cry, but it's fine. He said to me, you have a very, I get angry all over. This is so interesting. It's so long ago. I get angry, and also immediately I'm like, my arms are like, my legs are like.
You're in defensive mode.
Yeah. He said to me, you have such a good dad, he told me, about his brother. You have such a good dad, and he's also a great dad for your brother, he said. And my brother was going through a very tough time in his life. And my dad was a very...
So he was like 16 at the time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And he said like... he said, you also know your father, and we all have this temper. We have... Our family, everyone has this temper. And he said... And then he said to me, if your father confronts me, and maybe this is going to lead to a fight. And then he said, and I'm stronger than your father. And then he said, oh, I still get very angry. He died last year, but I still get very angry. And then he said, I have to breathe a little. And then he said, what if I kill him? He told me.
This was immediately after attempting to rape you.
Yeah. He said, what if I kill him? What would that do to your brother? He said. And I feel like I feel like is more violence than any of the physical stuff. Because I feel like a lot of perpetrators, they will maneuver you into a corner that is going to make you have to choose between yourself and someone else you love.
No,
you know what I mean?
It's
just a strategy.
Masterful bit of manipulation there. It's
because for me, I also had a very good relationship with my dad. Also a little troubled, sure, but also good. And for myself, I knew I am going to tell him. And also he knew, because he also knew us very well, my uncle. So it's just, I don't like the word evil, but it's just very evil.
It is evil.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
And I feel like when because this is why we're talking about it, like, so I'm on the floor on this mat and like foam is coming out my mouth, and it's about this evil.
Mm-hmm.
It's not even about the physical. I'm also, of course, but it's about this evil. Do you know what I mean?
No, I do, and I think there's. I mean, I get what you're saying, but we're here to talk about shame,
Mm-hmm.
and I guess that's the difference is you know there's the physical act
Mm-hmm.
itself,
Mm-hmm.
which is you know which is to be is one thing, and then there's this psychological manipulation.
Yeah.
And what fascinates me is how in your mind, you know, that dance looks, because that seems to me that would be the source of, you know, I mean, you shouldn't feel any shame whatsoever for what happened to you, but
No, but all sexual violence victims feel shame, but it's because shame about something.
yeah,
But it's because it's deliberately this is going to sound strange, but a good perpetrator. Somebody who values being a perpetrator or just values not being caught.
you mean good at it?
Good at it.
Okay,
Yes.
yeah,
Is always going to, what's the word? Is always going to take you, is going to, I'm searching for the right word, is always going to make you a hostage of some of that shame. That's how that works.
Mm-hmm.
That's how that works. That is the entire mechanism. So all the shame all victims feel is actually the perpetrator's shame, but then put upon you.
No, it's an amazing trick for someone to play on another human being.
Yeah, because I think he knew that I was going to tell my dad, but he also knew I love my brother a lot. And it's just like I have a child. My daughter is 5.
Mm-hmm.
I love myself, and I also love my daughter, and I would give my life for my daughter. So it's this mechanism. You know what I mean? So,
Yes.
So, and for a perpetrator, that's just, it's evil, and it's very smart, because that's why people stay silent so long for all these type of things.
But that's what strikes me as quite rare about your case. Is 3 days is an amazingly short time, and shows an incredible amount of bravery that you would turn it around so fast like that. Many people are sort of beholden to a secret shame.
But in that time I lived with my dad, and I'm just a terrible liar.
Okay.
And I was in those 3 days. I worked at a restaurant back then. I'm shaking all the time. Everyone asked me, "What the hell is wrong with you?" Like, people even said, "Like, you look a little pale." People would tell me.
Right.
Well,
Right.
I feel like that's it. And I was like, so for me, it was like, I'm a terrible liar, and also I'm a bad actress. I also was very shook, and I was living in my father's house, and we had a relationship. We saw each other, so I felt like either I'm saying something or and he had already asked me like, "What's wrong?" And I'm like, and I don't want to lie to him, but I also knew, and I did. When I tell him, I break his heart.
Yeah, that's got to be tough.
Yeah. And I did.
Let's just finish off sort of dealing with the rage against your uncle, and then let's go back to talk about your relationship with your dad, because the uncle thing seems to be the main part of it. It was the first one that you mentioned. He died a year ago.
Can I say, is it okay if I? Yeah, go ahead.
This is your show. You can say whatever you want.
I will say also because I feel like, and maybe else I forget? Like one of the things I also felt when I was on the floor, and I also was ashamed about it, is that I still love my uncle.
That's got to be a head fuck.
And that's also something, and so I've written my book and I've talked with plenty of victims. And this is also a big part of the shame if the perpetrator is somebody that you knew and loved.
Mm-hmm.
After all that happened, you still love that person. Most of us do. And it's very shameful. It's very hard to...
No, that's dark. I mean, that takes that.
Yeah.
That's what I think. That's one of the most complicated relationships a human can have with another human. Is liking the bully, is liking the oppressor. Is because that's the sort of one. It's one of the most disturbing dances.
Yeah.
Two humans can do together.
Yeah.
Okay, so I wasn't going to ask this question, but it kind of leads to it. Your uncle attempted to manipulate you after the event by threatening you and your dad and your brother and your entire sort of family. What did he do beforehand to manipulate you in that direction, or did it just completely come out of the blue?
The answer to that question is yes and no. I couldn't say, because you're talking about this process that we call grooming, yes?
Yeah, grooming or I mean, I think that's
it's a little bit of an icky.
Well, no, I don't know enough about this subject, or to know what the correct term would be. But I guess, how did this person how did this predator come to target you? Were there other people that he targeted as well? I mean, how did he arrive at that moment?
I don't know, but what I do know is that from a very young age, he was always a crazy uncle.
Okay.
He was crazy. He would take, my family's not gonna like me sharing this. He was just crazy. He would take weapons to children's parties.
Okay.
He would just make
You take weapons to children's parks,
but not like guns, but I don't know a lot about his life. I don't know as much about his life as I can probably figure out. But I think he's been in jail. I think he was in jail, and then he would have these crazy jail weapons.
Okay.
And I remember very clearly. I was 8. I remember this very clear. I was 8, and we had a birthday party. And we're in the garden, and these birthday parties of our family, like you have this very big, like Surinamese family, and people were barbecuing, and we're in the garden, and there's
Good
music
food.
playing, and it's just this Caribbean, like South American thing, yeah.
Yeah.
And I remember very clearly, and he was harassing one of my mom's friends. I remember at 8, and it was a whole commotion, and he was very skinny, and he would wear these T-shirts, and he would have these jeans, and then you would just see poking in his T-shirt these weapons.
His knife or something.
Crazy. And it could be knives, could be screwdrivers. That is crazy.
Okay.
So I remember very clearly, and some people in the family didn't like him, but I, for some mad reason, and I had to work through a lot of therapy to accept this, but I always loved him. And I would go up to him as a little girl, and I would say his name, and I say, I know people think you're crazy, but I love you.
Huh. Okay. What did you love about him?
Because he was also fun.
Mm-hmm.
And he would just dance, and he would have this mad humor about him. I wasn't afraid of him.
Mm-hmm.
But he was very specific, like a very specific type person.
Yeah.
Very specific. And I feel like, because I did give this a lot of thought, I feel like when we met, between 20 and 27, but up until recently, I just hated this part about myself. I hated the way I love people. Do you know what I mean?
No.
So after this happened, and before I start processing it, I'm in this story that maybe I also co-created this because I was always nice when clearly he was crazy.
Yeah, that's kind of I'm glad we kind of got there because that I think that seems to be one of the main sources of shame in victims. If a woman walks down the wrong bit of a
that you're somehow
that you blame yourself for,
that you somehow also you enabled or you co-created or whatever. I was also in that story.
How did you process that?
Well, it started when I started doing these funny, like, lie on the floor and foam from the mouth type
That's
retreats.
7 years later.
Yeah, but I didn't know. It's like now I can tell you, like, I hated the way I loved him, but I just hated the way I loved people. I thought it made me weak. When we met, I was 24. I was very closed down because I hated the way I loved people. Do you know what I mean?
Because you thought loving someone else would invite that level of violence into your life
and also
again.
it's weakness. I feel like plenty of people, now I can't even believe that I thought that, and I feel sorry for myself, but not in a condescending way, but I feel sorry for myself to even have had those thoughts. But I think a lot of people feel like the way they love or their love makes them weak or vulnerable.
Yeah.
And also my thing was the way I love makes me unsafe in the world. This is my story. This is a terrible story.
Yeah, I guess because a lot of, I guess some people, the only time they get to experience that sort of love is from, is from their parents at a time of life when they are weak and kind of shapeless and formless. And that shedding that kind of love is part of what toughens them up. It doesn't turn you into a great human being, but I understand that sort of
the mechanism.
That process of drawing away from parental love, and that's what teenagers, particularly teenage boys, do so disgustingly well. Is kind of as pushing yourself back, but then you need to go on and form mature and good relationships with others. But
if you want to,
yeah, exactly. Okay, so what? A friend of mine I was talking to a couple of years ago was telling me that when you, and this is the slightly sort of ridiculous thing to say in this podcast, but when you remember going to Paris when you're 8 years old, you're actually really remembering what it's like to be 8 years old. Not so much, you're not remembering Paris. What interests me about those time-stamped memories is that it's not so much about over time, it becomes less about the events themselves and who you were at that particular time. So who were you when you were 20 and your brain recorded this story of this horrific event? Does that make sense?
Before that happened or after?
Just where you were at that point in your life.
It's difficult. This is one of the things that's a little bit difficult because I don't know if I can access very well before.
Okay.
I know. I don't know.
Okay.
But after this, I do know that after this, I'm like, I was in a relationship when this happened. I told my boyfriend, and he was, I don't know how to say this, but emotionally not that equipped, I feel. And he was just like, he didn't know what to do with it. And he was like, I don't know what to do with it. And then I told my family, my dad. It was very hard to tell my mom. It was easier to tell my dad, actually. It was very hard to tell, because my mom had always been, from the earliest memories I can remember, my mom just always warned us about anything, everything. So I felt a little bit like I let her down.
Had she clocked the crazy? Had she spotted the crazy uncle before? Do you think?
Yeah, she knew, of course.
Okay.
And she had told us, but my mom, her upbringing was very strict, but also really with an emphasis on keeping us safe.
Okay.
Like an overemphasis, I will say.
Was there more shame associated with in your relationship with your mother because of the event, or with your father?
I found it way harder to tell my mom, because I felt like I had failed. Like she was always like, be be careful. She was like, don't. She literally said, don't sit in. You can't sit in a man's lap, not even if it's family. She said all these things.
Really? Okay. Had anything like that happened to her?
I don't know. I don't know.
Okay. And what about sort of? I mean, the title of this podcast is shame. So I'm not trying to.
The Great Shame Show. It's called.
Well, yeah, but I'm not trying to sort of see shame in every step of this story. But that's why we're here is to talk about that. So I'm just trying to work out where the shame started, where it kind of where it led to. So I guess just kind of breaking down your relationships with your dad, with your mother. What about with other family members? What was you said it when the family was destroyed by.
Not for everyone.
Okay.
Obviously.
Yeah.
And with family, like in Dutch, you have a different word for family and like the household. Yeah.
Okay, let's talk about the household.
Yeah.
The immediate nuclear family, as we'd say.
Yeah, okay, nuclear family. That wasn't destroyed, but it took a great toll on us. It also brought us closer together.
Okay.
But it also took a great toll on my dad. And so that's that. And then we have the family at large. And then of course, nobody wants to hear a story like this of an uncle. Nobody wants to hear this. Who wants to hear that somebody you love, that nobody wants to hear this. So what happens, and I was very sad about it, but I also really understand, but I was also sad. Some people are, of course, in denial about it, of course.
But if someone denies your story like that, I mean, that must also create shame, because it's like they're blaming you for causing this upset.
Yeah.
If they can't process it.
Of course.
Okay.
Of course that
Did
happened.
you feel any of that shame, or was it just
Very much.
fuck you?
No.
Okay.
Of course, also fuck you, but the fuck you is only the outside of it. So of course, the book is in Dutch, right? And so you haven't been able to read it, but it's a little hard for me to read my own book. I think it's a great book, but I don't love reading it because it was very hard to write. I felt like I had to just break my bones every day and then write some stuff down. But there's also there's this part in the book, because I'm telling the story to my dad, and there's this part in the book, and it says, "Do you remember we used to be family people?" Do you know what I mean? And now it's like, I don't know. That was hard. Because I feel like my identity was always that I am like a family. So not only a nuclear family, but just, I love these almost like this romantic picture of like 50 of those guys, 50 of those people in a backyard. Like that's, I love that. I see it in my daughter. My daughter is 5. Her father is from Congo, and they have a very warm family. I still feel very at home with them, and I see it in my daughter. Like we are wired for family, actually. So it's just, I was very sad about that.
So there was shame with your mother that you hadn't listened.
Well, no, I had listened, but it's still I had because I'm not sitting in people's laps.
No,
but I had because I had failed to protect myself.
Okay, but also anger.
And she never. Also, I will say she never. This is all in my brain,
this is all in
because
your head.
she never said, because she was always very supportive.
But that's the fascinating thing about shame is that the majority of it is created.
Sure.
In our own heads, it's a feeling rather than a fact. Do you know the difference between shame and guilt?
Explain to me.
No, I was looking up the definitions, because I sort of I thought about them, and I couldn't sort of tease them apart. But I mean, they're very closely related. Feeling tends to be, shame tends to be a feeling that we have in our heads about behavior that we've done wrong, and guilt, and often something that sort of stepped over social norms, whereas guilt is a fact and tends to involve something that we've done to another person, you know, an offense.
Oh, I thought that shame was. I thought the difference was that shame is. You're coming from this story that there's something wrong with me, and guilt is I've done something wrong.
Yeah, no, they're quite
Okay.
Yeah, I think we're talking about the same thing. I've written them down. But you had back to your parents. You had the shame with your mother, but also you mentioned anger with your father for not protecting.
Yeah, but that came from what I noticed, and this is why I'm really an advocate for trauma therapy, because this great trauma therapy really has the ability to first confront yourself with, I have this story about this. These are stories in your system, in your mind. And then to examine these stories. Like the story I had about that my dad needed to protect me. This just came from a very young part of myself. Do you know what I mean?
No, I know. I think I know exactly what you mean. That's kind of what I was saying about the Paris when you're 8, because there's this story, this incident, this traumatic incident was burnt into your memory at a very specific time of your life, 20, when you're kind of, you know, you're in between being a child and in between being an adult, but yet that story itself will change in the retelling. So you have this kind of one cycle where the story is turned over and retold and all that, and then you have this other cycle which is you actually evolving as a human being and as an adult and as a girlfriend and as a, you know, eventually as a mother. And my understanding of it is that trauma, often that story holds us back from becoming who we're meant to be. So the fact that you see this with your dad as, you know, as his failure to protect you is very much, you know, is the story of a daughter, isn't it?
Yeah.
But you might not recognize that now because it's changed so much.
Yeah. Also, it's not true, but I will say, and I have to add for a second, like, I have to decide for a second if I want to go there. It's not true, and I can imagine if someone is looking at this or listening to this, they think that's a very irrational.
No.
But I will say this. I have to think about it for a second. When this happened, my father was very close by, and it had to do with this.
Mm-hmm.
He was very close by. And in a gazillion different scenarios, and I have a very woo story about that if you want to get into it. Mm-hmm. Very woo, but very cool. I'm sure there's also, it could have happened. He could have intervened, but he didn't know. But he was close enough for it. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, that's tricky.
Do you know what I mean? So
yeah.
So that's why that story at 20 is in my brain like this. But then I had a very mystical experience about it that set it straight. But maybe talk about that later.
Or maybe not.
Or maybe talk about it not or now.
We can talk about it whenever you want. Look, but tell me the mystical story.
Okay, so.
Because it's another form of story, isn't it? About
of course
processing what happened.
It's a story, but it really changed my life.
Okay.
And I think I categorize it as a very mystical experience. So it's 2016. I think I've already written a book. Yeah, because that came out in 2014. And I'm at a Tony Robbins, of all people, Tony Robbins event.
Mm-hmm.
And I went to that event is called Date with Destiny. And it's 6 days. And I love Tony Robbins. I know there's also people that just don't believe in any of it, but I love him. And it was the 5th day. And he does he takes us through like a thing, and he calls it a closed eye process, but it's just an actual meditation. And
Okay.
I'm a meditator, and if you meditate often, then it's easier to get into this.
Yeah.
And I'm also somebody that can go very deep into meditational state. It's also, and we talked about this off camera, like it's also the main reason I don't do drugs, because I'm not that interested in drugs, and I feel like my brain in and of
Take you
itself.
to those places, yeah.
And I think he gave us this theme of something that still felt unresolved.
Mm-hmm.
So I've already written the book. My dad already has died in the meanwhile.
Yeah.
Right after the book, I've written the book. My dad died right after it.
Did he get to read it beforehand?
Yes.
Wow.
It was just. I think that's why the book woke me up in the night with all these paragraphs intact, because it's like, write me, because this is the only window.
This is the timeline.
This is the time.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm at this Tony Robbins event, and we're doing this closed eye process. And he asks us to pick something from our life that is unresolved. And I picked that thing from my life that is unresolved. I'm like, why didn't my dad, who was fairly close by, why didn't he stop it? It's a childish thought, but it's still in my system. And then he says all these things, and we're in this meditation, and then something, I don't know, I've never done any hallucinative drugs, but I imagine it's like this. And it was just so strange. So we're in this state, and then Tony Robbins asks us something, and I just felt like a deck of cards with all different scenes is just thrown at my feet. And like a movie montage, like even when I'm saying this, it just sounds mad, but it's really what happened. It was as if my unconscious said, do you want to see the alternatives?
Oh, okay, that's interesting. What were the alternatives?
And then I saw, and it was very rapid. I feel like I've never done ayahuasca, but probably this is something you can see in an ayahuasca tree. And I would just, I think I got 12 different scenarios of how that could have gone.
Talk me through them.
I don't know all of them anymore because it was so overwhelming experience. But all of them were worse than my dad not saving me. All of them were worse.
Really? Okay.
Let me tell you just one.
I
So
can
I
imagine.
saw one. It was madness. I didn't even know the brain could do this. But
Yeah.
people on drugs can tell you, yes, the brain can do this. So one scenario is my father intervenes.
Mm-hmm.
And now he's fighting with crazy uncle. And then he kills my dad.
Yeah.
That's not a better scenario. Another scene was my dad intervenes. He fights with crazy uncle, and crazy uncle kills him. That is, or I don't know if maybe
You
I'm
said
saying the
that
same
one,
thing. Okay, the other way around.
Yeah.
Also not great. There was also a scenario where my dad intervenes, they fight, and I stick a knife into crazy. So none of the scenarios were better than what happened. And this was, I can't do it justice. I'm telling this, and I'm not telling it the right way. But
You're doing very well. I mean, it's a pretty amazing way of your brain reordering that until that is
And it doesn't even matter if it's true. It doesn't matter if it's true. It doesn't matter if it's real, because frankly, and I feel like you know way more about the brain.
I don't.
Okay.
I really
Then
don't.
that's the only, my assumption is that you know a little bit more about the brain than I do. It doesn't fucking matter. So I saw all these scenarios. None of them were better. And then, of course, I also cried again hysterically. And I just and then I decided that the way it went down was the best way for it to go down. And then I just made my peace with it, then and there.
And was that the last bit of sort of healing that you had to do, do you think?
No, not for the entire thing, because then I still had to heal my entire sexuality, and that's another thing.
Okay.
But in terms of, for my dad and I, yes.
Okay, but the flip side of of all of those scenarios, and where there's still this horrific scenario of the attempted rape by your uncle, where that is the best possible thing in that deck of cards.
Yeah.
The flip side of that
Yeah.
is clearly, I think is clearly survivor's guilt, which I think is a form of I think is a form of shame. I associate that with shame, the shame of having survived.
I have to really check in with myself. When you say it, I don't feel anything in my body. So I don't know if that's true for me.
Okay.
I will say this because somebody that's listening or watching this, and I'm going to say something radical, but it's also the truth for me. I can imagine it sounds very strange when a person says the attempted rape was the best card out of the deck. Yes? That sounds strange.
Look, it sounds strange, but it's. I think it shows amazing insight to be able for your brain, whatever part of your brain is doing this, to sort of give you a slideshow of alternatives which are much worse. It's quite an incredible thing to do.
It was very insane to experience. But I don't want people watching this video or listening to this podcast to be pressured into you just have to be grateful for whatever happened to you.
No, I don't think that's the message.
No, but I will say that, and it's not the only thing, but that situation made me who I am. We wouldn't be sitting here, obviously not having this conversation, but also all great things in my life, and I feel like I have a great life, also derive from not only this incident, but I don't know what happened because of that incident.
Okay, so if
I had to do my life again, I would totally take it. I would take it all.
So if you did it all over again, or if you had a chance to remove that incident from your life,
I would never remove it from my life. Never.
Despite
Never.
all the sort of shockwaves that it sent out.
Never.
Okay.
Never. First of all, I would never remove it from my life.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think I can be the mother that I am. Especially because of the healing journey, it kicked me on. It just threw me into this healing journey, which is the best thing ever. But it also, I would never take it back.
But that's some tough maths. I mean, that's you. This happened when you were 20. You only kind of came out of it when you were 27. You're 40 now.
Yeah.
So I mean, that's 7 versus 13 years. I mean, that's a third of your life since that incident is being locked in. That's
yes,
you
but
think it's still worth it?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, because I feel like a lot of people are locked in by all kinds of traumas. You can also live a life as a locked in person. It's just not that fun. And it's not that remarkable.
Yeah.
But you only know that when you get out of it. I didn't think I was a zombie for 10 years. I kind of was, but I didn't think so. I didn't look it.
No.
But I didn't. No, I would never take it back. First of all, it taught me to always tell the truth. Because if I can tell my dad what happened and my mom, I can tell everybody what. So, and now this is my work.
But before we get to that, just we looked at the incident and the perpetrator and the family members, or the perpetrator and all of the people involved in the immediacy of it.
Mm-hmm.
We talked about your wider family as well, but you also come from quite a sort of traditional church-based community.
Mm-hmm.
And shame and religion go hand in hand. You know, it appears right at the very beginning of, in the Bible. It's one of the first things that sort of that's mentioned. The shame of Adam and Eve. But that's a digression. You come from this sort of a shame-based culture to do with religion.
Mm-hmm.
What was the shame in the wider community? Outside of your family, your nuclear family, your larger family, and then in the community, were there any repercussions there?
I don't know if I understand the question correctly. Like, this is what's coming up when you ask this, and this is not an answer to your question, but I will also try and answer your question. But maybe
I guess what was the effect on religion in your feeling of shame in your community?
Like, when this happened, like, I don't identify as religious anymore. I feel like I'm spiritual. But back then I felt very identified with religion. I don't anymore, but I'm very glad that I was religious when this happened.
Really? Okay, go and explain.
Very glad because, and I will thank my mom for this, because it took me, so there's religion, and then there's, as a religious person, you also have a core relationship with God, hopefully. And then there's the religion stuff. And it's church, and it's all these things. And all these churches have different things, and we all have the Bible and stuff like that. But what I'm very grateful that I was religious, because it also helped me to forgive my uncle.
Well, that's what I wanted to talk to you about that. He died last year.
Yeah.
What was your relationship with? Did you ever speak to him again? Was there any contact with him again before he died?
Yes. When my dad died, he called me. I remember this very clearly. So my dad died, and right before my dad got sick. He got cancer, and he came and lived with me and my then fiance, and then we took care of him, and then he died. And then I'm the oldest of his children, and my dad wasn't married, because he separated from my mom. And I arranged, with the help of my mom and her husband and my brother, I had to arrange I was like the project manager for his funeral and all these things. And then, so I don't know much. I don't know a lot about that time. We had a beautiful, like, Surinamese funerals, and these things are like parties. A Surinamese funeral, there's food
there. What does this Surinamese funeral look like? What is it?
It's lots of people. There's music. Our color of mourning is white, not black. There's this ritual of we dance with the coffin to the burial. It's very cool, actually. We celebrate the life. It was very, very busy. My dad used to be a teacher, and all these children were there. He used to, like, tutor them for free on Saturdays. We would always laugh at him. We're like, why are you tutoring people? And then at his funeral, I'm gonna return to my uncle. At his funeral, all these children were there. And they just wanted to, like, say beautiful things. So it was a crowded party. So a week before we bury him, he already died, or maybe 5 days ago. 5 days before we buried him, then my uncle called me. I'm sitting in a restaurant. My mom is there. My brother's there. And my brother is this very big, very strong looking, very gangster looking. He's very smart, and he's a writer, but he's a very tough looking guy. And my brother was just, I don't know. So I felt like I'm going to arrange as much as possible, and then my mom helps me and my stepdad. So we're sitting in this restaurant, and we're really like, and I'm not even that good of a project manager, but like a project manager, I'm like, we still have to do this, we have to do this. I'm in this mode. And then somebody calls me, and it's my uncle.
Did you recognize the number? Did you know?
No, of course not. No, because it's now years later.
Yeah.
Yes, and I never had this number in the first place, of course.
Okay. Did you anticipate that at all?
No, not at all. And he just started talking and he said, your father died. I want to come to the funeral, he said. I still feel it in my body when we talk about this. And I say, listen. And I really respected my dad. And I also respect the position. That's one of my dad's brothers. My dad had a lot of brothers. I said, listen, you are allowed at the funeral because it's your brother. But you have to know that you broke him. You broke his spirit, and he never recovered from this. Oh, so I still feel it in my body. And I said, if you are allowed, and my dad, because he was sick, and the cancer had taken a lot away from his body. He was very skinny when he died. Yes, I think he was a grown man, and I think he only weighed when he died maybe 40 kilograms.
Jeez.
So cancer really, it's not like in the movies. It really eats the body from the inside. So 40 grams is like, what, 80 pounds, 90 pounds?
Nothing.
And I said to my uncle, I said, when you look into that coffin and you see the 40 kilograms of a man, you have to know it's not the fucking cancer that killed him. You know?
It was this.
It's you. And if you can face it, you are welcome.
Jesus. Yeah. Yeah.
Come and face it. You have to look at him. Look at it. If you are man enough to like own it, you're very welcome. And I meant it also. But then, of course, he never came.
He didn't come.
No. And I feel like...
Did you go to his funeral?
No.
Okay.
No. No, I did. No.
Have you been to his grave?
Of my uncle? No.
Okay, no, I just wondered whether you had anything left to say to him after that conversation.
No.
On the phone.
That conversation it's a little emotional, but because I don't talk about it so much. But it was very good conversation because
it's
he had never.
Spectacular thing to say on without preparation or if someone cold called me like that who had done something like this to me, that shows remarkable power.
I don't know if it's
bravery.
power. It's just really true. It's not. I don't.
That's pretty. I think that's incredible.
Thank you. It's the only time we've ever spoken since I was 20, and and he said, I will give him credit. He said, I've never known what it is that you talk about, but whatever you think I did, I'm sorry for it. That was his apology, and I took it.
Yeah.
I took it because obviously you're not going to say like, yes, it's absolutely true. I ruined your life and I took you away from your family. That's at heart, he was of course also a coward. So this is a coward's apology.
It is. That's exactly what it is. It's a coward. It's a coward's
and it's
apology.
fine. It's still an apology. Yes.
Yeah.
It didn't mean that much, but it was like it
was the best he could do.
Yeah, it was the best he could do. And also, and this is true, I had forgiven him. But I feel like some people get these mixed up ideas about what forgiveness is. It's like, what it means to me is exactly what was in the conversation. Like, I see you, I disagree, but I know that in a very strange way, this has nothing to do with me anymore. This is just you. You are a coward. And in this life, you can also choose to be a coward. It's just something that some people are. It's fine. So there's no, you know what I mean? And if he did come to the wedding, if he did decide to show up for the funeral, I would just respect him. Just being, I wouldn't talk to him necessarily, but because that's also his brother. He's not only, like, one of the things that are very important is like, a perpetrator is not only a perpetrator. Just that I'm not only a victim. He's also my brother's father. They have spent an entire youth together, childhood. He's also a father. I can say lots of things about it. But he's also a granddad. He was. He is all these things that I don't know anything about. You know what I mean?
Why? It's not a particularly bright question, but the police were never involved.
No, I never reported it, and never for a second thought about reporting it.
Why not?
I feel like for a lot of victims, this is because, first of all, how can I prove this?
Mm-hmm.
And I wasn't ready for that type of like confrontation with like the reality of it. And also, and maybe we're going to talk about cancel culture in a second. I'm against cancel culture, even when it's the perpetrators are just these heinous people that do heinous things. I'm against cancel culture. For me, and maybe that's wrong, I don't know. Because later it turned out that he had also molested some other people in the family, also before me.
And what about after you?
I don't know. Could be. And one could say, like, you have to take this responsibility to, I don't know, put someone in jail. And I think that sounds correct. And also, I wasn't up for it. And that's
no. I mean, I guess I was originally asking that in terms of sort of forgiveness. Whether had he gone to jail, had he suffered for what he did to you.
I think perpetrators suffer for what they do. I think perpetrators suffer for what they do.
There's lots of different, all around the world. There's just lots of different ways of treating perpetrators. I remember being on a beach in, where was it, like the Solomon Islands off the coast of Papua New Guinea with some local friends of mine, and there was a guy who was a bit sort of a bit morose on the on the beach. He was one of their friends, but he was sitting apart from us. And I said, what's going on with Johnny over there? And he was like, oh, Johnny's killed his dad a few weeks ago. I was like, okay, isn't he in jail? And these guys looked at me like I was crazy, going, why would we send him to jail? He's clearly upset about what he's done. He's suffering enough. And in that community, in that particular case, it was enough for everyone knew that this man had done something wrong. He'd done something wrong, and he was suffering for it. To incarcerate him and all that. I mean, it's a very weird way of looking at it, but you kind of had to respect it on some level.
Well, maybe in a very small community, this is always the possibility that the suffering is just that you have to deal with yourself. Like, I will say,
did other people know? Sorry, back to your community in the church and all that. Did other people know what he had done, or was this kept within the family?
I think it was more kept within the family, but then I'd written that book. Like, I feel like.
But was that a decision? Sorry to bring this back to shame again, because really you've called this a shame.
The Great Shame Show.
A shame-based podcast, but really what we're talking about is trauma. But was there a sense within the family that this was a shameful episode that couldn't be mentioned outside of the house?
Of course.
Okay.
Of course.
And that must
the family at large, you mean? Of course.
Yeah.
Of course.
All right.
Of course. But I don't know everything. I don't know all of it because I'm not there. My dad had some conversation. My dad had a confrontation. I don't know, but my dad never wanted to share with me what happened. But I knew that some people didn't believe me.
Mm-hmm.
And also I knew that some people felt like I should be ashamed. But not all of the family.
Okay.
Of course, not all of it. And also I love that family. So it's very layered. But the thing is that I never thought to press charges. For me, the most I could give it, and I think for me it's enough. And I can also, if somebody's looking at this and judging, like I'm also part of maybe it happened after me and I'm also partly responsible. I get this train of thought. I get it. But I am not on that train of thought. Like I was truthful to my parents, and I was truthful, and I wrote my book, and I'm opening and I'm opening up these conversations, this is all I can bring, and I wanted to bring.
Yeah.
And I hope that it makes a difference. It's also a big part of the way I work and how I work and the women I work with, even though that's more business related. But it has this as like the core of it, that we express what is real to us, even if it's hard stories, difficult stories to tell. So, and that is what I had to give. And I don't know if that's enough, but that's what I have to give.
No, but I think it's a. I'm just trying to. It feels wrong for me to be in this position asking you these questions because it just feels like it feels slightly impossible that I'm trying to extract more shame out of the situation. When
You're like wrenching it for.
Exactly, because this is kind of the mission statement you've given me to talk about shame, but actually you strike me as someone who's managed to rise above this trauma over the years, and in fact, even there's bits of sort of post-traumatic growth in everything that you've done, but there isn't that much
shame left.
No, or even reason to be shameful in the first place. Reason, I mean, shame is something that mocks you because it is unreasonable, but it's not a.
But you know what I did? Do you know what it is? I think because the minute, and this is also something I talk about a lot with my with the women that are in my community. Shame can only exist if it's not expressed. The minute you start expressing, it's already transforming. Now you see that you're not alone. You're opening up to new perspectives.
Yeah.
Like, when I went into these retreats, I got such new perspectives, and it just changed the story. And I feel like when I wrote the book, the week before the book was coming out, I was in a relationship, I was engaged. We never did get married, but I'm throwing up every night. I threw up every night for like a week or so before this book comes out, because the fear is like, I'm going to tell this story of how this happened to me, and I'm just going to be damaged goods. This is my fear. The world is going to know I'm damaged goods, because that's how I felt.
No, that's a horrible thought to have in your head.
Yeah, but that's how I felt.
Yeah.
But shame only has power when it's not expressed. It's when it's in the dark. So now the book comes out, and then and the book didn't sell well at all. And I did promotion, and I'm a really good promoter, but back then I wasn't that good a promoter. If I would re-release it, I think I could do the book a lot more justice. You know what I mean? But it didn't sell very well. But the people who read it, I got all these like messages, and people came up to me. Then I start understanding we all share similar. It's not the same. It's not the same story, but we all share similar experiences.
Yeah.
Yes. So then I go to another retreat, and now I have to fix my relationship with my body, because what happened when I was assaulted, my body went limp. Yes. And now I'm very disappointed, because apparently I identify as a fighter, but apparently in the most important fight, my body shut down. I'm very angry also about this. Yes. It's not in my brain like this, but you know what I mean? And I feel like a lot of distrust in my body. I feel like at the moment when it really counts.
No, we talk about fight or flight, but we ignore freeze. I mean, freeze is.
But that's what happened. But I didn't know. I didn't know back then. I'm still a lot younger, and now I'm just very disappointed as a whole. Like, I feel like when it's the most important moment, my body just doesn't function, I feel.
It's not true. It's completely wrong.
I know, but I didn't know that. And so I went to one of these retreats, and I met this really wonderful guy, and he really explained to me, like, no, that's your body, that's your body caring for you, and that is your body making this, just trying to survive a situation. You know what I mean? And it was just a new perspective for me. I'm like, and it's. Do you know what I mean? I feel like I'm.
No, I know exactly what you mean. I mean, look, it's. I mean, this is what I know of from sort of high risk situations. It's fight, flight, or freeze. But the point is, like, in the terrorist attacks in Paris, some people, tried to fight, they were killed. Some people tried to run, and they were killed. Some people just froze and slid down behind the sort of, the knocked over cafe tables, and they survived. So it's just a case of what the response. No, but
you know this.
No one gets to pick.
I know
their response.
I know, but you know this because your life has been dedicated to, like, experiencing and researching. So you know this. But me as a 20-year-old, I don't know this.
No, of course not. Of course not.
Up until that moment, like, I'm from a violent neighborhood. I'm not afraid to fight. I had plenty of fights in my my identity is a fighter. Do you know what I mean? I'm up until I'm 20. I'm living from this identity of a fighter.
Of course, but I guess that's one of in these kind of. In these type of crimes, in these sexual type of crimes, that sort of that freezing mechanism.
It's normal.
It's normal.
I know,
but it's often the source of the source of shame, isn't it?
I know. Let me tell you a story. Like a couple of weeks back, I did an event.
Mm-hmm.
So my clients are like women entrepreneurs. Yes. And this beautiful, and I always cry. I always cry, but I always cry also at my own events. And this.
I'm not feeling so bad now.
What?
I'm not feeling so bad now if you cry all the time.
I cry all the time.
All right, good. Whew.
That's a relief, right?
Yeah, definitely. I was feeling shame for making you cry. But
no, it's fine.
Okay,
it's
cool.
Fine. So I'm at this event, and one of our clients gets up, and we have lots of clients, so I don't know all of them by face. So she's new to me.
Mm-hmm.
She gets up and she's sharing, and it was so beautiful, about that she wants to be more expressive, but that she shuts down. She's sharing this. And even as she's sharing it, we're seeing this. We're seeing this. And also in a way, it's beautiful. And then I was working with, so it was me and a friend of mine who is a great coach from London. Her name is Christine. So Christine is just working on her with, like, helping her, like, connect to her body. Like, can she feel when she leaves her body?
Mm-hmm.
Can she, and then gives her some tools to, like, return to her body. So this is happening. We're doing this, and I just feel, and I always cry, and nobody is ever worried about it. I'm so touched by it because now I understand this mechanism. I probably also understand where it comes from. That's not what it's about.
Yeah.
And then and she's just so beautiful and brave, and she's like, oh, it's happening again, and I feel like I have so much to express, but I just leave and I just want to stay present, and she's just really trying. And I don't know. I started telling this. I don't know.
I don't know where you're going with that.
I'm almost done. Let me just catch myself. And then I could explain to her. Christine was doing all this work,
Mm-hmm.
and now I could explain to her in just very, like, regular, like, stupid language. Like, this is what I know.
Mm-hmm.
I used to hate this about my body, but now I don't hate it because I understand what it is. And then also I say, you can also work with it. And then we created this very cool format for her that has this, like, as a form. And the reason I'm sharing this, I don't exactly know why I'm sharing this, but I feel like everything that I've learned and still am learning about all these misconceptions. A lot of trauma is also misconception.
Mm-hmm.
misconception, but then with the worst story for yourself. This happened because, and then the worst story for yourself. And now we just get to reframe it. And then we just actually came up with a very cool format of her, and she can work with this leaving the body, coming, returning to the body, leaving. And it just became, and now it became something that is just fun and creative. And I feel like all of these things all of this shame is just being transformed into like, I don't know, cool stuff. I don't know.
Okay.
Very awesome. Very cool. I don't know if I explained it very well, but
No, you did.
maybe you had to be there. I don't know.
No, you lost me there a bit. I'll be honest. So we met 2007. You're 24.
Yeah.
And kind of in the middle of the shame and the trauma of what happened to you.
Yeah, but I wasn't very aware of it.
But because you were numb.
Way more than I am now. I'm not numb anymore. But of course, one of the things that's so smart about like numbness, you don't always know that you are. I didn't know. All
right, but one of the reasons, the main reason why you reached out to me after all of these years is because we had a conversation in Cuba.
Yeah, where we met.
Tell me about that.
So a year ago, I'm doing this business video and I'm looking for an example of how sometimes it takes a really long time to understand something that someone has said to you.
Yeah.
And I'm doing this video and it's a business related video, but I like to take examples that are non-business related to clarify. And the point I want to make is that somebody can tell you something and it just can take years and years for you to understand what they said.
Yeah.
And I think of you. Because when we met in Cuba, I think we had only seen each other for like a couple of days.
Mm-hmm.
You were there on like a writing assignment.
I was boxing.
Yeah.
There was
and you were
amazing...
writing about it also, yes?
Yeah.
And I don't know where we met or how. I can't remember. I was with my cousin, but I know that we joined you. You were boxing every day. And then I think we joined you for a couple of days.
Yeah.
Do you remember?
Yeah. We the three of us went out to dinner and drinks, and that went on for a while.
And we had like all these cool conversations. But I remember, but I don't know if I remember correctly, that I was just you were saying like some important, I feel like fairly important stuff, and I was very standoffish and not always, but also arguing with you. I don't know, but I don't. Was that true?
Yeah. Yeah.
And then you'd said something about, I think it was either about love or about God. One of those
Not
things.
like me at all. Okay.
Yes, it's maybe you're just maybe trying to impress me. I don't know.
No, I mean, that sounds more like me at that age. I'm shocked you remember me as a nice guy, but yeah, go on.
I remembered you being very nice. You're very shocked by that. That's interesting. Why are you so shocked by that?
Well, I'm
because you weren't.
Yeah. I mean, the idea of me saying anything profound to anyone that's going to kind of, is going to hatch as a thought 7 years, or 16 years later, or whatever it is, that doesn't strike me as kind of my MO in life. I'm delighted to be here.
But you're still a little bit like, what am I doing?
What the fuck? Yeah.
You said something. I think you said something about. It was either about God or love. And I remember, and I don't remember exactly what you said. I'm very sorry, but I remembered when you said it. I felt it was very important, but also my entire character was like, I don't give a shit.
Right. Okay.
But I never forgot.
Yeah, healthy response at the time.
I know, right?
Yeah.
And then also, but that's maybe for another podcast. You were telling me about this insane plan you had.
Mm-hmm.
And I've never forgotten that you were going to do this experiment, and I also never forgotten that. So then years later, and I don't exactly know. I tried to find you online. Maybe also say like, I'm not gonna say not sorry, but like you were actually a very cool guy, and I was very close down,
Right.
but you weren't. But I thought you were. And then I created a video with the lesson, but with the lesson of like sometimes there's a delay between what somebody says to you and that you receive it or how you receive it. And then somebody that I don't know transcribed and translated it and found you and said, listen, there's this very cool girl in Amsterdam in the Netherlands and she's saying all these nice things about you. And that's how we reconnected.
No, she didn't. She didn't do that at all. She sent me a 30-minute video clip where in Dutch, where all I could hear was my name and sexual trauma. So no, it wasn't. I thought I was about to get Me Too'd. On
really?
Yeah, completely.
Really?
Completely. Yeah, completely.
And then of course
that's all I could understand from this clip.
And then she explained that it was actually me saying nice things.
After a week or so. Yeah,
you are kidding me.
No.
You're okay.
No. Of course, the irony is that I probably was trying to Me Too you at the time, but yeah. So no, it was a slight
you was trying to Me Too me.
Yeah, and your cousin.
That's
It's like
classic.
Me 3 or whatever, Me 4. Yeah, yes.
Wow.
So I guess that's kind of what brought us here. I still don't quite understand what sort of magic words I said, which is what brought to do with trauma and shame and all the kind of things we're talking about.
It wasn't beautiful words about trauma, no.
Okay.
And also, I think it had some. It was simple, but also very profound. I think it was somewhere along the lines of like. But even like now, we still don't know each other very well, but I know you better. And now, I can't believe that guy said that. Maybe you were just saying shit, like saying stuff.
Probably. Yeah.
But I think it was somewhere along the lines of that it's important to be open to receive.
Okay.
Not in a non-sexual way, obviously, but open to receive, like to receive. Love, to receive ease, like I think in a very cool way and very loving way, you just told me to fucking relax a little bit.
Okay, yeah, that could be me.
And that's really what I needed to hear. Only I wasn't very aware of it, and I don't know why I remember it after all these years, because a lot of people say a lot of things to each other.
Yeah.
But then I thought it was a great story. I couldn't find you online, and then because I did try, and then it was a great story. And I accidentally said your first and your last name, and I was a little bit after the video. I was like, but then I'm like, at this point, I'm even doubting if that was your actual name because you were like invisible online. So
right.
I'm like, I'm sure this is just going to. It's going to be fine. And also I said great things about you. So, but I'm like, it's going to be fine.
So far. Okay.
And now we're here.
Yeah.
But I was still when we met, I think the day, I don't remember exactly how and when, but I think in that vacation, I also had a panic attack in the street. So then I was not a full blown, but like a panic type thing. And my cousin had to take me back to the hotel. So I was still in this phase of my life that the trauma was I had no control over it, and I was still.
What provoked that? Do you remember?
A very slight thing that happened, a very minor thing that happened in the street with a guy. Very, very.
Who reminded you of your uncle, or what was the
no, it was just
link?
like So it was like me and my cousin. It's two girls. We're on a vacation. It's Cuba. It's just the streets. it was just a pushy guy in the street. But to be very fair, like that's not that uncommon,
Mm-hmm.
you know. But for some reason, it struck a chord, and I was a little bit panicked.
But that sounds like post-traumatic stress disorder, doesn't it?
I wouldn't
Where
classify.
some small cue can
set you off.
trigger such a sort of a huge response in your fear network or in your fear system.
But the thing is that didn't happen all that much, and when it happened, and that is one of the things of people. We can be in trauma and very unaware. I thought I was doing fine.
Mm-hmm.
But I was just, this is not nice that this happened, but I'm not in this space like I need to work on this. Not at all.
And you didn't do any work on it until the 7 years later and the retreat that you went on.
Yeah. I didn't do any. I did read about it a little bit, and I was still I try to I don't know, like I don't know what how you say this in English, when you just try to like put it in a drawer and just close it, like
repress.
And also through my religion I try to like compartmentalize it a little bit, like this has happened, it could have been worse, it's not nice.
Through the sort of Christian religion that you were born into, or the more New Age stuff which you got into later.
No, New Age.
Well, I think that's an archaic term for your spectrum of
astral planes type stuff.
Pagan beliefs. Yeah, exactly. How do you mean? Like forgiveness.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I just forcefully try to forgive, and I say forcefully because I feel like I'm very good at forgiving. It's a skill, but first you have to go through like your rage and your anger. But I try to skip the rage and the anger part and just go straight to like forgiveness, sort of to be done with it.
During Cuba, when 4 years after this happened, who were you talking to about the trauma and about the shame?
My cousin knew. Because I had shared with my parents.
Yeah.
I spoke about it, but I wasn't aware. I thought that now this sometimes jumpy way of being, this sometimes fearful way. I thought that this was my new reality. I didn't think I could change anything about that. So I just learned to live with it. I'm now more scared. Like in the first months after what happened to me, this idea is in my mind that like all men that are walking in the streets, it's just like loaded guns walking in the street. This is my new way of looking at things.
Yeah.
That's not a nice way of looking at things at all. But this is, and I just try to relate to this new perspective that is a lot more fearful. I just try to relate because I didn't realize, and I know this now, that I just thought this is my new way of feeling, and I'm just trying to go and make the best of it.
Okay.
I didn't know I could rewire and completely transform. Because I feel now at 40, I feel way more free and way less scared than even maybe before. You know what I mean?
Okay.
But I'm not sure.
But why is that? Is that because, I mean, this incident gave you this sort of this almost universe of adversity that you had to fight through and overcome? I mean, but that must have been incredible sort of training.
Yeah, it's a training ground for sure.
If you survive it.
Yeah, it's a training ground. I feel like I'm very grateful. I know what it's like to be very scared. I also know what it's like to feel like you want to kill someone, and everything in between. I feel like I know myself very well, and I have a lot of trust in how I deal with things.
And you were never tempted to sort of to turn to medication or drugs or alcohol or anything like that. Why is that?
No, alcohol, yes. But never drugs. But I've never been interested in drugs. And when we met, I worked at a television program, and all the other presenters tested drugs for that program. It was a very controversial, very well-known program in the Netherlands. I was the only one for the longest time, and then another presenter came in. He also didn't want to. I was the only one that didn't want to use drug and had to renegotiate this in my contract every year. I'm like, I have to renegotiate again that also this year I don't want to do drugs.
Right. But even just from a sort of from you talked about sort of religion on one side as a way of dealing with it, and I guess the other side is apart from the illegal drugs is pharmaceutical drugs. That if you went to your doctor and said, listen, I'm suffering from panic attacks and all of that, he would have prescribed you anti-anxiety medication or antidepressants.
But this is so funny when you say this, suffering from panic attack. I never even experienced it. Like I'm now more fearful sometimes. That's how it's in my brain.
Okay.
And I'm just trying to deal. I don't love it, but I'm trying to deal. But I was never in this identity of like, I'm suffering from panic attacks. And also,
but surely if your cousin had to take you off the streets in Cuba, from
a minor thing.
Well, but it sounds like you're describing it as a minor thing, but it's a cue towards quite a panic attack, which is a horrific thing to undergo. And surely you sort of thought that did you think this was curable, that it was worth investigating, that it was worth talking it through? What did you do with that experience? Or you were still just so sort of numb and accepting of your condition that...
I think I was accepting. Okay. And also when you say it like this, I also like, for a part of my life from 7 until 17, I grew up in not a great neighborhood, like a pretty bad neighborhood. And I feel like, and I'm not sure if that's true because as I'm speaking, I'm just trying to like investigate, like, is this true? But one of the things when you grow up in a neighborhood like that, it's also more normal to be very alert.
Yeah.
And just for some context, because this podcast is in English and I'm from the Netherlands and we also have bad neighborhoods, but it's not like some of the stuff that you see like on American television, like with only guns and just only drugs, not like that, but violence. It would be very normal in our neighborhood to fight. It would be normal for a lot of people to jump a person. These things would be normal. It would also be normal. I knew from a very early age, I think from 9 or 10, I knew that there's guys that take young girls and put them to work in prostitution. And I could always tell who were the guys.
Yeah.
And also when you grow up in a neighborhood like this, and that's why I'm sharing, there was this contempt for girls that didn't know that this is a guy like this. And even a little bit victim blaming. Well, you should have seen that this is...
Right.
They call them, I don't know, they call them in the Netherlands, they call them lover boys. It's such a strange term. And it's...
But for a pimp. I mean,
yeah.
Essentially what...
And it's pimps and they pimp very young. They're young themselves, but they also very young. And it's not like... it's this whole thing. But they call them lover boys. It's a strange word. So, but I knew from a very young age what those guys were. And I prided myself on being hard ass. Do you know what I mean? I prided myself for that. So that's my background before all this stuff happened. I think one of the reasons I don't do drugs is because in the neighborhoods where I grew up, it's always the dealer is in higher esteem than the user.
Yeah, well, that makes sense from my experience.
So if you were to do anything with drugs, and I never did, but plenty of people that I knew did, you would just always want to be a dealer and not somebody using it. Yep. You know what I mean? Yep. But this has to do with if you're from a poor neighborhood.
No, but it's it's interesting in the last, the 20 years or so, we've had kind of a revolution in how we understand post-traumatic stress disorder. And most of that comes from the war on terror and lots of young men and women, but mostly men, especially Americans, going off and fighting this. And if you have this huge data set, then you get to sort of begin to understand post-traumatic stress a bit better. And I think Americans are also slightly more they have a larger common vocabulary of psychological terms, on the whole. So they seem to be kind of leading the way in terms of post-traumatic stress disorder. But what they're also finding out is that soldiers can go off and serve, and maybe 10% of those will actually go off and do the fighting. The other 90% will stay on the big bases and do incredible work in support of those soldiers. But actually, you look at a poor neighborhood back in America, especially a poor black neighborhood, you're more likely to suffer from post-traumatic stress just growing up in that neighborhood than you would if you go to war.
Like, I'm from Europe, so I don't know, but I can totally relate.
Yeah.
So when you're saying like this horrific thing and you had this panic attack, for me, it was also normal to be very watchful in the streets.
Yes.
And for me, it's also more normal through that part of my childhood. So for me, this is not a very different, it's not this outstanding circumstance. Like I'm having a panic attack in the street. I'm like, okay, I'm very afraid in the street. Do you know what I mean?
Back to just one last question about the shame and the incident. If you did pride because pride and shame are quite are very, very related.
Mm-hmm.
And if you prided yourself on being this street tough girl in a bad neighborhood who knew where the danger signs were from the lover boys and all of that, was there more of a fuck up when the threat was actually coming from behind you in the family?
Of course.
Well, tell me about that.
So, of course, because I feel like, and I think a lot of victims can relate. So, generally, it's unsafer to be a girl in the world than a guy. Just in generally, right? So I feel like I feel like I've always done a pretty good job staying out of trouble.
Yeah.
I just went to school and I was great at learning and then I just read books and I wasn't a cool girl in that neighborhood. People thought I was a little boring, which is great. But back then I didn't love that. Also, I really knew how to fight. I wasn't, for the longest time as a child, I didn't. When I would hear people from like better neighborhoods just talk about fighting and just so scared and it's just really dangerous, I was like, what the fuck are you guys talking about? People fight, right? I remember I was very young and I got into a fight at school. I think I was maybe 9 or something. And then a guy had stuck like a very sharp pen in my face and just dragged it down. And then I had a scar. And I remember being proud. I came home. My mom went crazy, but I thought it looked cool. A scar on my face.
Wow.
I thought it looked cool. I thought it gave me some edge. Yes. Yeah. So I feel like even though, and I'm so happy that my daughter is in a completely different circumstance, but I feel like I'm acing that shit, right?
Yeah, you are. Yeah.
And then this happens, and I didn't see it coming. And also it's somebody that I love. And he knows that I love him. And I just felt weak, like I failed. No?
Yeah, no, that would, I can see, that's why I asked the question. I can see that would be, that would fuck with my head.
Yeah. And
it's built on it's built on a total and utter fallacy. And actually most of these type of predators operate within the house rather than within the street.
It's hardly the guy that jumps from the bushes. And it's always somebody you know. It's always somebody you have this relationship with. It's always somebody that knows your weaknesses. Like my uncle knew that I love my brother and my brother's going through a rough time and he needs his dad. So he takes that and he just throws it in my face. It's always these things, and it's so layered. You know what I mean? It's not like this is a bad guy and now he needs to die and everything is fine. It's just very layered. It's just the structure of a thing, the dynamic of a thing is broken, and then you have to make it. You have to rebuild it.
Yeah.
And that's very hard. And that's why I hate cancel culture, because cancel culture is like, this is the bad guy. Let's shame him. Let's take away everything, and now we're done. So it's I'm all for expressing. Like I wrote my book.
Mm-hmm.
I did say that it was a family member because or else I can't talk about all this family dynamic. I never said who it was in the book.
Okay.
I didn't, for the longest time, I also didn't say that it was one of my father's brothers, because my dad had a lot of brothers, but not like endless brothers. So,
Yes.
so it's like
Narrows it down.
when it's 7 brothers, it's like one of these 7 brothers.
Yes.
You know what I mean? So the thing about cancel culture that I hate is that it doesn't really solve anything. It takes care of this very important part. It's like expressing, but you also have to take responsibility in how you express, I feel. And everyone should know for themselves where the boundary is. And then it's like, okay, now it's expressed and this is the bad guy. Let's just bury him and just move forward. But how about all this, what we're talking about already for 2 hours?
Mm-hmm.
All this dynamic, all that stuff that needs to be healed, yes?
Yeah,
Or
it
else-
just seems like rejecting any of the complexity. But
Yeah.
I guess I don't have to deal with cancel culture that much. I haven't come across it. But you're a personality who's online across multiple platforms. You must see it.
Yeah, but
quite a bit.
everyone can get cancelled. At
Yeah.
any time, you don't have to relate to it.
No, it's not the case. But I guess what I'm saying is I don't draw an income from it. My job is way off in the Middle East, where most people don't have smartphones, and people cancel each other with
Guns.
Kalashnikovs. So it's kind of, it's just a different. It's very very different there. And also, actually, strangely, there's lots of kind of hidden mechanisms of forgiveness and healing that we have out in the Middle East, which is somehow often much more sort of beautiful and organic and I don't know where I'm going with this, but I don't know, are just outside of, are completely different from most of the sort of models that we've spoken of, I guess, from a sort of Western psychological, therapeutic point of view.
I think we're talking about this because, so I've written the book and I went on and I hate these words, but I went on a healing journey and became better for it. Not as well as before, better. Now the alternative. It's 2023. This happened to me. And now instead of writing the book, going on a healing journey, I decide to out my uncle on Instagram.
Okay, that's interesting. Yeah, go on.
And I say, this stupid motherfucker.
Yeah.
And cancel him. And now everyone from their own pain just jumps on it. Everyone that's ever been assaulted just jumps on it. Everyone, all these other people that have been silent for so long and on the sidelines, they have to now prove that they're not on the sideline. And everybody, and then they cancel him. And I'm like, well done. Because you express, and expression is very important because I feel like it's the antidote to shame. So expressing, and then it's well done. And so now fucking what? Do you know what I mean? And now what? Do you think he's less of a perpetrator now that he doesn't have an income anymore? Do you think he's less of a perpetrator, or do you think he's more of a perpetrator? Now that we've also stripped him, I'm not saying oh, poor him, but now that we've stripped him away of his income or his whatever cancel culture does, yes? Yeah. And also for me, the victim in this fictional story. So what I've now learned is that I've said, and it's true, this is the perpetrator. And everybody says, well done. And so now fucking what? I'm still out there with all this shame, with my character and all the stuff that happened to my character. I'm still fearful in the street. I'm still, you know what I mean? What's the...
No, I know exactly what you mean. There's kind of two things here. One is that actually you've had it been 2023 and you pointed towards him and basically said, you know, the shame on him, you would have weaponized shame. You would have weaponized the collective shame of, you know, of tons of people sort of pouring down onto him. But it also would have denied you the adversity of all the things that you went through on your, you know, on your healing journey. It would deny you the chance to become better.
Yeah.
Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, and also like, because, and it's not about that you shouldn't say. It's not about don't express, because I also expressed. I outed my uncle to my dad.
Yeah.
Yes? And also paid the price for it. There's always a consequence. You know?
Mm-hmm.
It also killed my dad in a sense. This is true. This is true.
Yeah.
I asked when my dad was sick. I'm digressing for a second. When he was very sick and he was living in my house, and he had become so skinny, Ben, so skinny, and that was beautiful, but also very hard. And then our roles changed. He always for fun called me mom because I tried to tell him what to do all the time. But now I'm his actual mom. Yes, I have to bathe him. You know what I mean? And I had this wonderful fiance, and he was very strong, and he would carry my dad up the stairs because we would live. So now I'm bathing my dad, and I'm massaging his feet, and I have to feed him because he can't eat for himself. And I asked him right before he died. I said, "Was it worth it?" I was honest. Was it? But it really, we paid a very high price. I think it's the only thing we could have done. But was it worth it? And my dad said, it was worth it 1,000 times.
Really? That's an incredible conversation to be able to have.
Yeah. And also, so then when he died, I had all these emotions, but I didn't. But that part of the conversation was complete, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so let's go back to this whole cancel culture thing. Like, I'm not saying don't speak your truth. I don't say that. I'm also not saying don't out people. I do say, like, before you out someone, what is your intention and where do you want to go with it? Because if it's only rage, and I am very familiar with the emotion of rage, and I also have no judgment about it. But if you are coming from this place of rage instead of working with it, like I told you earlier, yes, I was just, my body was taken over by rage. And I'm like, I think I'm going to put a knife in this motherfucker's back, right?
Yes.
And then she said, check yourself into this retreat type thing. So I know what rage feels like. But if you come from it, if you, instead of working with it like I did.
But do you think, I mean, so are you saying that the difference between that cancel culture is a form of revenge?
Of course, that's the thing. It's expression and it's also a form of revenge. And I understand this because I really also know what it feels to be vengeful. I remember when I hadn't processed anything, I saw an interview of an American actress named Gabrielle Union, very beautiful black actress. And she shared how she, at 18, been raped and killed her perpetrator. And I felt jealousy that she killed him.
Yeah.
I was so jealous. I'm like, oh, I was just only frozen, but she actually killed. So I understand this. Do you know what I mean? I felt actual jealousy. And of course, I was ashamed about that also. But if cancel culture is more about revenge and less about expression, I feel like everyone's gonna lose, right? Because in this realm of revenge, there's no work for the victim. Do you know what I mean?
Because that's exactly what I was saying in terms of it denying you adversity, valuable adversity that you can use to sort of
you have to work with
grow
it because
through
it
the
already
trauma.
happened.
Yeah.
So you have to work with it. Like I'm thinking,
Have you spoken to people who've been in similar situations and taken the sort of the cancel culture route?
I don't know if it, maybe not in terms of sexual violence, but I know plenty of people that.
And how did the end of their story differ from yours? Where do they wind up in the end in terms of their journey?
You just stay in your rage because you throw it out there and a reaction is there and then that person is cancelled or it's not cancelled. But you are still in your rage. And it's a very understandable rage. I get it. But for me, I feel like a lot of my life started after the rage was released. I feel like my actual life started after that. So what I would love for them is to not get, not get stuck in that. And I feel cancel culture.
That's kind of what my question is now. I mean, why are we having this conversation with microphones when we could just be having it with over a cup of tea?
Yeah. Because I feel like, so we're in interesting times and I feel like there's a lot of things that are open for debate and are able to be talked about more than maybe ever before. But sometimes I really miss those deeper layers. So when we talk about trauma or when we talk about victim, perpetrator, or when we talk about shame or a lot of those conversations are pretty level surface. And I feel like there's so much to be gained.
Why do you think they're level surface at the moment? Because I mean, we live in interesting times for many different reasons, but it does seem that especially women, but also men to some degree are talking more freely about mental health than they've ever done in the past. Why do you think that's just surface?
Because in order to go into the depth of what these things are, you have to release this construct of the victim and the perpetrator. This construct is the restriction for the depth.
Okay.
Do you know what I mean?
Oh, yeah, it's a huge thing to try and
I know.
try and deal with, especially if you're looking at sort of sound bites, because they're.
I know.
So explain it. We have some time.
Like in this structure of, like, when when the true forgiveness came for my uncle, when I saw him with his grandchild. I saw him playing with his grandchild because we never spoken after what happened, but I did see him twice at some family function things. And I would go to this family function and my mom would go with me and I would just be very nervous, but also I want to be with my family and I want to be with. And then I saw him playing with his grandchild and I was so shocked. I'm like, he's also somebody's granddad.
Yeah.
And then I realized, like, in my mind, he's only a perpetrator at this point, yeah? He used to be my uncle, now he's only... And then I thought, maybe if he's not only a perpetrator, maybe then I'm not only a victim. And that gave me some space.
Yeah, no, that's huge. Okay.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, completely.
So, some of these conversations that are very anchored into... it's only the victim and the perpetrator, and the victim is this very... confined role, and then the perpetrator is this very confined. So you get stuck in this, but it means that if a victim is more than just what the bad thing that happened to her or him, then the perpetrator is more than the bad thing he did or she did.
That shows an amazing amount of forgiveness. I mean, they're just of tolerance. So you're saying, okay, yeah, so you can't have one without the other.
Of course.
That's huge.
But I feel like this is why, and the minute that we're aware, now we can investigate all this stuff. Now we can work with some shame, we can work with some trauma, maybe some forgiveness. But as long as I think you are just the perpetrator, then I'm just the victim, and then I'm just stuck in that identity.
What do you think about the term survivor?
I don't love it. I do not like it.
You hate it, don't you?
Yeah, that's what I wanted to say.
All right. Why? Talk me through it.
I think Destiny's Child made a great song about it.
No, what is it?
It's called Survivor.
Okay.
It's a very cool pop song.
Seen that one. All right, coming. Okay, no.
So I also think it's a great song, and also I don't love it. And I don't know why I don't love it. But I think it has to do with
it's still sort of being beholden to the trauma, isn't it?
It puts the trauma in the middle of everything.
Okay.
My trauma is not in the middle of my life at all anymore. At all. So it's like the trauma is the island and then all this water around it, and then it's not a good analogy at all, but just that's something that I'm seeing right now. I don't know. I don't love it.
Okay. I'm just wondering what the equivalent would be for a perpetrator. Well, if victims can be survivors, then what happens? What's the equivalent for a perpetrator?
I don't think I know.
No, I'm asking. I don't know either. I mean, I guess my there has to be some element of redemption in the whole thing for everyone, and often there's simply not. But that's the gold standard of the majority of religions that have done us any good in this world.
But it has to be, right? Because how is a perpetrator even created? Some perpetrators were victims first.
Well, that's another huge thing is that I once sat in a room with they were all male. There was about a dozen victims of childhood sexual abuse. I mean, and this was a very, very tough children's home. They were sort of the adults coming back for a reunion. There's about a dozen of them, and they were talking. They were saying, "Listen, 80% of people who abuse have been abused themselves."
It's a cycle.
And they were saying that that means that one of us in this, more than one of us in this room, will either be abusing or go on to abuse. And it was an amazing bit of sort of self realization of that cycle, as you said.
But I feel like when we really take this into account, I feel like the entire conversation now has to change, right? Not global, but societal conversation about it now has to change. Say like so. Going back to I'm 27. I'm enraged at this not so slightly abusive boyfriend, and I stick a knife into his back. Now I'm a perpetrator. Yes. Same cycle. I'm sticking a knife into his back. I thank God I never did.
Yeah.
But now I'm a perpetrator, right?
Yeah.
And it's straight from my own trauma. So I feel like this is the way trauma travels. Yes, if it's not
dealt with.
Yeah. And
do you think there's a shelf life to trauma and to being a
I think it can travel on for generations. Generations. I never know, and I'm probably never going to know, but I wonder how my uncle, I wonder how he got that way.
Well, that's why I was asking, why about your mother and whether anything like that had happened to her. There was a fascinating experiment. I'm going to completely mess this one up, but I think they took a bunch of mice. I'll be able to dig out the paper afterwards. They took a bunch of mice and did something horrible to them, like electrocute them or something like that. And each time they did this, they would expose them to, I think it's vanilla essence, the smell of vanilla essence. So it was just completely kind of trained within them, and then they stopped doing that, bred the mice successively for many generations,
And then still, when the smell came on, people, and this is something. But now I feel like we can talk for 2 more hours. We're not going to, but but now, and this also has to do with some of the not religious but spiritual beliefs I have.
Okay.
So, and that's why I think the way we're approaching this, and that's why I wanted to have this conversation, is just very limited. So what you're saying, so say you can just, a trauma can travel through an entire line of like, say, women or men, or for us, like, I don't know if you know much about Caribbean and Dutch history, but my parents are from Suriname. I was born in the Netherlands, but I'm Surinamese. Suriname used to be this colony of the Netherlands, and it was a slave colony.
Yeah.
Right? So a very simple thing, and I feel like Surinamese people are going to hate me when I say this. I just apologize in advance, and it's not that bad, and I mean well. And if you're canceling me on Twitter, I don't really look on Twitter, so go ahead. But like, one of the traits we have as Surinamese people is that we have a way of speaking that's very commanding. And in Dutch, you say, and I would have to translate. It's this form of the language. It's called gebiedende wijs, and it's very demanding. So it's not like, Ben, could you hand me that jug of tea? It's like, Ben, hand me that tea.
I thought you were just being a celebrity.
No. It's just my
it's a cultural thing. It's just your genes talking. Okay, I just thought it was because you're a princess.
I also am a princess.
Okay,
obviously.
all right.
So we have this way of talking, right? And I feel like, and it's very specific, and we make jokes about it, and it's a thing, and not everyone does it, but most of us.
Where does it come from?
And it just, if you just trace it back, and people hate it when you start speaking like this. It's just the way that slave owners would talk to slaves.
Wow.
Do you know what I mean?
No, but I can imagine. I mean, that's
and it's not. I'm not saying this is traveling through our DNA, but it's just habit.
No, but that's. I mean, that's. It can certainly be a shockwave within sort of the culture of a
yeah, but if
like
you have to imagine for some hundreds of years, that's the only way people spoke to black people, and then black people also spoke to each other like that. And now it's 5 or maybe it's more than 500 years later.
There's still, that wave is still traveling.
And this is how things work. So when you become aware of this, there's so much work you can do for yourself. I'm questioning, investigating everything in my life. Every thought that I have. It's fun. That's why I don't watch TV. I'm questioning my beliefs instead. I don't watch Harry and Meghan. I'm questioning my fucking beliefs instead. That's you know what I mean?
Place to be.
And I'm just trying to figure out, where does it come from? And there's nothing wrong with speaking like this. But I can also choose. Like, I don't speak to I sometimes do. But I try to be very mindful. Not because of anything, but I'm just trying to experiment, like, see if there's a different outcome, you know what I mean? I don't want to only speak gebiedende wijs against my child, you know what I mean?
What about with shame, the subject of all of this? What are the easiest steps that you've learned on your journey to escape the sort of the cycles of shame?
Oh, you have to go right in it.
But I thought the whole problem with shame is being too inside your head. What do you mean?
No, you have to go right express it and just be in the sentiment of it. I was so my hobby now is trauma therapy, yes. And then and I go to these retreats, and we do all these crazy meditation type things. Yeah. And one of my favorites, they call it inquiry. I don't know if I say it right. And it's very simple. It's a little bit like what we're doing here. It's, you put a timer for 5 minutes. There's 2 people. You have to be engaged and be in contact. only one is talking, the other one is listening. But the one that's listening can't really respond, but has to be present. This sounds very easy. It's very hard.
So bearing witness as
Yeah,
some
but very
religions will say.
actively bearing witness.
Uh-huh.
But you can't in any way react. And you don't have to be all stoic about it. But for instance, say you are sitting and you're talking about, I don't know, you're talking about how you're just so in love with this girl and she broke your heart. Yeah? Now I'm listening. I can't even nod.
Okay.
I can't even nod. I just have to take it in and be with it. So now in this, it's a really fun thing. We can try it later if you want.
Right.
After all this talking. So
But
now,
is it? I mean, are we talking about sort of spiritual stuff?
No, it's not.
Or
No,
is it
it's
just a practical.
This is very practical.
Being heard, being felt, being.
No, but as the one listening. So for the one speaking, it's also interesting because we are not very used to people being with us, very present, but not interrupting. This is a very rare thing, and this spurs all type of also sensations. The sensation of being seen, maybe some grief about realizing that you don't have a lot of that in your life. But for the person listening, so you're talking about how in this fictive, like how this girl broke your heart. And you're just so sad about it. And because there's all this space you can go, you're so sad. I can't do like,
Okay.
I understand. Because all of this is coping mechanism. This is coping mechanism. It comes from a great place. So now I'm just sitting with it. And now all types of stuff is happening inside of me. Maybe I'm thinking about my own heartbreak. And then I feel guilty because I'm supposed to listen to you. But it takes me to my own heartbreak. Or maybe I think this fucking guy needs to get over it. And now I'm dealing with, oh my God, I'm not very empathetic at all. It's really interesting. 5 minutes feels like an entirety.
Okay.
And what it teaches you is to be with your emotions without trying to solve. And this is really how you get to know yourself. You're going to find out you're not that empathetic at all. You hate weakness. You this, you that. And in this is my favorite way of working with emotions. I found out in this that I have that I come from a lineage also with incredible shame. Women and shame around sexuality, just shame.
Okay.
And I've in this type of interaction, I remember one time when it was my turn to talk, I was sitting across from a guy and I was sitting like this. And the thing when you talk is you have to voice everything you're actually feeling at that moment. And the other person can't respond. And I just remember thinking and feeling like, look at me with my legs open. This guy is going to think I'm a horse. So now I'm voicing this. Yeah. I'm like, oh my God, I'm having this thought that maybe I
Poor
think.
guy. Yeah.
And now he can't respond and he has to deal with it. And then I really went into it. And I'm like, and I feel so ashamed. And actually, but it's true. I do think about sex. It's also, you have to also make a little bit of a game of it, but be very honest. And it's a very simple way to really go into depth of all these emotions you have, all the shame you have around it, expressing it. It's being received, but it's not, people don't react to it. And this way of working through it, this is, I'm very excited. I wish everyone would do this.
Yeah.
5 minutes.
Yeah.
5 minutes, 5 minutes. It's very hard and it's very cleansing, and you'll get to know a lot about yourself and
How
your
often
bullshit.
do you do this? How often do you, I mean, if trauma workshops are your hobby, how committed are you to your hobby?
To all this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
I try to do as much as possible.
Okay.
But
But I mean,
also have a busy life, but
it isn't.
But I'm every night. And I also watch some TV or some series. But every night, I'm in a version of this. Every night.
That's a lot of. I mean, is there?
People don't, and I create everything from it.
It's been 20 years.
Yeah, but it's not
since this thing happened.
Yeah, but it's not about. It's not. I'm not in it like working on these old traumas. I'm not, because I feel like I already worked through it. but there's always new things.
Is there?
Always, every day.
What was last week's?
I work a lot around things that happen with me and my daughter. It's very hard to be a mom.
Mm-hmm.
It's very wonderful and it's so hard. Let me tell you one story. As I've been telling you lots of stories. Like very recently, I have a lot of time to spend with my daughter. I created, my entire company is structured in a way that I have a lot of time to spend with her, because that's very important. Because when I grew up, I feel like my mom had to work very hard and we missed her a lot. But she was working for the family. Parents are divorced. And the price we paid was that there wasn't much of a family life. As I'm sure many people that know struggle can relate to, yes? So I very consciously created my business, which is a very big business, for me to have lots of free time to spend with my child, yes? And we do all these cool things. And it's so confronting for me.
Go on.
You know? So, for instance, my daughter, I had a period that my daughter just wants me, when she goes to sleep, she wants me to lay next to her and cuddle her in a certain type of way until she falls asleep. And it can take up to 20 or 25 minutes. And she's like,
Bless.
Mom, can you? And then for a while and of course I do that and I also like it. And I feel very rich that we are able to do that. But for a while, I think for a week or maybe two, after she was asleep, I just cried for my own.
For your own childhood?
Yeah.
But mourning your what you didn't have. Okay.
Yeah. So that's something I will take into this practice. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, no, that's beautiful. That's a fun, spectacular example.
But so it's these things. I'm not still hung up on that old trauma, but I feel like I've learned that old trauma taught me this way of very Navy SEALs type way of processing my emotions. And
That's
I use it
hardcore.
for everything. It's also the reason that my business is so successful. Because every time there's a hiccup, and there's always lots of hiccup in business. A business is always solving problems, so there's always lots of problems. This is the way I investigate what's wrong. It could be a team member that's not functioning. Could be a plan that I have. This is the majority of people think I work very hard, and I don't, because I do this shit all the time. And it's just really the fastest way.
Just to clear the decks.
Yeah. Wow. I'm just clearing a lot. I'm not even... And then I have great energy in the sense of I have a lot of energy. But I'm sure there's way better business people out there. I'm sure there's people with way better... But I'm just clearing the deck all the time. And people perceive it as, you have a really easy life. Or an easy business. I'm like, yeah, but I'm fucking sweeping the deck 30 hours a week, right?
But that's best practice, and that's kind of, not at the end of your journey, but certainly you're well underway, and you're highly trained in that kind of methodology now. If someone was listening or watching this right now and just about to start that journey, what is the first practical step that they can do the second they finish this?
Okay, so something terrible has happened. You feel like this is affecting you, but you don't really know how or when. The first thing I would say is to express it. Find somebody you feel safe with and just start sharing. And then I hope it's a person that respects you enough to not spoil the moment for you by just trying to console you. Just be a safe space for you.
Okay.
To express. I feel like that's also what I do in my business. Mostly, I'm just a safe space, and people can express anything. Anything.
Is that person they go to? Is that would you recommend a friend or a professional counselor or a psychologist?
It depends.
Or a trauma specialist?
I think a trauma specialist is best, but sometimes that's a very big step for people.
Okay.
So maybe start with a good friend, but then really you have to work with the trauma. You or just die slowly every day, a little bit dying. That's that's really the only options. Or it's like slowly dying a little bit every day, but ever so slightly. Or you have to work with it. But then when you start working with it, you become fucking magical. Because when you can process your emotions like this.
That's kind of black belt level, isn't it?
Maybe. I don't know. I don't know how many levels there are to it, but it's fucking awesome. You can create anything. You can create anything you want for yourself.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
I really believe that.
So you can spin shame to gold.
Yes.
Okay.
Diamond status, like Rihanna type shit. Yes.
Oh man, that's my black belt thing was way better than that. But yeah.
Okay, fine. You win.
That's a pretty good place to end.
I think so too.
Cool.
Thank you.
No, thank you.
No, thank you. I knew you were the right person for this. You know this?
No, I don't know. I don't feel like the right person, but thank you for saying that.
Okay. I know that you were. And I think this is going to do exactly what it needs to do.
I hope so.
So thank you.
Anytime.